Welcome to Season 2, Episode 18 of our monologue series. Today we're going to talk about what makes change stick. At the end of our last piece, I left you with a question. If visual spatial tasking reduces the charge of an activated memory, what actually allows that change to hold? That is what we examine now, because disrupting a memory is not the same as storing it differently. And if the nervous system does not store the update, the old pattern returns. This is Pillar 3 of our 10-pillar series, the mechanism that makes change durable. So let's start with the foundation. In 1949, a Canadian researcher, Donald Hebb, described a principle that still holds in neuroscience today. He said, neurons that fire together, wire together. When two neurons activate in the same window, the synaptic connection between them strengthens. That is learning. That is the physical basis of memory. And every memory the client carries is a pattern of the neural activation. The pattern runs. The synapses reinforce. The pattern becomes easier to run the next time. This is not a metaphor. This is biology, which means something clinical. Every response that the client has that they do not want is a pattern that was learned. And anything learned can be updated, but only under the right conditions. So here's a problem. Most approaches assume new learning overwrites old learning. It doesn't. When you introduce new information on top of an existing pattern, the old pattern's still there. It goes quiet, but it's still intact. This is called extinction learning, and is what most therapies produce. The client feels better for a while, then stress hits, then sleep slips, and then the old pattern comes back online because it was never changed. It was suppressed. So why do most interventions lose traction over time? Because extinction is not reconsolidation. Now here is where it shifts. In 2000, a research group led by Karim Nader published findings that changed the field. When a memory is activated, it becomes biologically unstable, labial. The proteins that hold the synaptic pattern in place begin to break down. The technical term, as I said, is labial. And for a limited window, minutes to a few hours, that memory can be modified. Not suppressed, not covered, but modified at the source. And then that window closes. And then the memory gets restored. Whatever state it was in when the window closed is what gets encoded moving forward. This is memory reconsolidation. And it's the only known mechanism for updating an existing emotional memory at the level of the nervous system. So for you, the practitioner, the question becomes precise. How do we use the window? 3 conditions must hold. Condition number 1, the memory must be activated. Not talked about, but activated. So the pattern is actually running in the nervous system. Number 2, the client must be regulated. A system in sympathetic overdrive cannot integrate new information. Change does not happen in chaos. And number 3, new information must enter inside that window. New meaning, new resources, and a different response. When all 3 hold, the old pattern is rewritten. Not forgotten, rewritten. And that is why the change is durable. We did not teach the nervous system to tolerate the pattern, we updated the pattern. And this is where effective memory resolution lives. Effective memory resolution, or AMR, is the process of resolving emotionally encoded neural patterns that continue to influence physiology, perception, and behavior. Now the definition becomes precise. Emotionally encoded because it's held as affect, not as story. Neural patterns because it's biology, not metaphor. And influence physiology, perception, and behavior because this is what a live pattern does in the body and in life. AMR operates inside the reconsolidation window. Now add to this visual spatial tasking. VST creates the working memory competition that allows the update to happen. Together they form the protocol. And I'd like to address the question I hear most. Why does trauma stay in the body? That is the description. It's not the location. The body is expressing what the nervous system is holding. The body is expressing the tension, the gut response, the hypervigilance, the reactivity. These are downstream. They are symptoms of a pattern that is still encoded upstream. So when the memory is resolved at the source, the body stops running the pattern. The shoulders soften, breathing changes, hypervigilance drops, sleep begins to normalize. This is not because we worked on the body, it's because we updated the memory that was driving the body. That's the difference AMR makes. Here's the second question. How do you know when a memory is actually resolved? You measure it, of course, before and after. You measure the emotional response on a scale from 0 to 10. And you measure specifically, with reference to trauma, you measure fear, terror, and helplessness. Ask the client to reactivate the memory, fully associated, and as you watch them, if the memory is still there but the charge is not, the update held. And then you take them into the future, to a situation that would have triggered them in the past. They run the situation in their mind, they notice something different. They're calm, they're regulated. The pattern's not there. That's the test. That's the signal. So now the third question. Why is this not more widely known? Well, my first response, I don't know. But here's what I really think. Because most training teaches the conversation, not the mechanism. Most models focus on the story. I hear so many arguments for people to hold on to their story, right? Most practitioners have never been taught to distinguish extinction from reconsolidation. That distinction is a difference between temporary relief and resolution. So if you take one thing from this pillar, take this. The brain exhibits plasticity. Memory is editable, but only under conditions the nervous system accepts and allows. You do not get lasting change by working harder. You get it by working with the mechanism. AMR is the application. VST is the technique that makes the update possible. And reconsolidation is the window. Hebbian plasticity is the foundation. And that's pillar 3. That's the mechanism. That is why the work holds. And this brings us to the next question. If the mechanism is this clear and the biology is this specific, then we have to be precise about what trauma actually is. Trauma is not a story. It's not a character flaw. It's certainly not a weakness. It's an injury. An injury to the nervous system. And that is what we examine next. If you want to apply this clinically, the certification is where we teach the full mechanism and the protocols that we use. The link's below. If you want a lighter path, we're launching an app in May that walks you through it experientially. If you want to work with me or one of our coaches, that option is there. But first, answer one question for me. Which of these 3 matters most for your work that you are doing right now? Why does the body hold what it holds? And why do most interventions lose traction over time? Or how do we know when a memory is actually resolved? Comment below. The next piece in this series is built on what you tell me.